It was a quiet Saturday morning when I, Henry Morgan, 32, decided to dig through the attic of our Sugarland, Texas home. I climbed the creaky ladder heart heavy with memories and started sifting through dusty boxes. That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. The wooden box holding Mom's keepsakes, a hand-engraved watch, and a small and delicate gold necklace was gone. Not misplaced. Not tucked in a corner. Gone. I froze, my pulse racing. That box wasn't just stuff. It was Mom. Her watch etched with her initials ticked through every family dinner. Her small and delicate gold necklace worn close to her heart was my last tether to her. I'd promised to keep them safe. My dad knew that. My stepmom, always fussing about space, had to know too. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. Had they done something unthinkable to fund her big birthday bash, I wanted to storm downstairs and demand answers, but something held me back. I needed proof. My hands shook as I closed the attic door, mind racing with what I'd uncover. You won't believe the betrayal I found or the price they paid when I exposed them. If you've ever lost something irreplaceable, hit that subscribe button and share your story in the comments. Don't miss how this unfolds. Trust me, it's a wild ride. By Sunday evening, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The empty spot in the attic where Mom's keepsake box should have been gnawed at me. My gut screamed that Dad and my stepmom had something to do with it, but I needed proof before I lost it on them. I waited until the house was quiet. Dad was watching football, and my stepmom was out with her friend planning her big birthday bash. I slipped into Dad's study, a cramped room with his old desktop humming in the corner. If there was any clue about Mom's missing watch and necklace, it'd be there. I powered up the computer, the screen flickering to life. Dad's email was already logged in. He never bothered with passwords. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard, guilt creeping in for snooping, but the image of Mom's engraved watch pushed me forward. I scrolled through his inbox, skimming subject lines about bills and golf outings. Then I saw it, an email from Sugarland Pawn sent 2 weeks ago. The subject read, "Confirmation of sale, items received." My heart sank like a stone. I clicked it open. The message was short, clinical. "Dear Mr. Morgan, we've processed the sale of one engraved pocket watch and a small and delicate gold necklace for $1,000. Funds deposited to your account. Thank you for your business." $1,000. Mom's watch with her initials carved in delicate swirls and her small and delicate gold necklace worn through her hardest days, sold like junk. My hands shook, gripping the mouse. How could Dad do this? How could he let my stepmom talk him into it? I dug deeper, checking his sent folder. There it was, Dad's reply to my stepmom, forwarded with the pawn shop's email. "Lorraine, it's done. We've got enough for the party now. Let's not tell Henry." My blood boiled. They'd planned this behind my back, knowing how much those keepsakes meant to me. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen, my chest tight with betrayal. Lorraine's birthday was turning into some extravagant blowout. She'd been bragging to her friend about it for weeks. A fancy caterer, live music, the works. All for what? To impress the neighbors. And they'd gutted Mom's memory to pay for it. I remembered overhearing Lorraine on the phone with her friend gushing about how this party would be the talk of Sugarland. "It's my 50th, she'd said, her voice dripping with excitement. "We're going big, renting a tent, hiring a band. It's gonna cost a fortune, but it's worth it." A fortune. That's what Mom's keepsakes were to them, a quick buck to fund Lorraine's ego trip. I wanted to march out and confront Dad right then, his cheers for the Texans game echoing from the living room. But no. I needed to see the pawn shop first. Hold those keepsakes in my hands, confirm this wasn't some mistake. My mind raced with memories of Mom. She'd worn that watch every day, its soft ticking a constant in our old family dinners. Her small and delicate gold necklace, a gift from her own mother, was her way of staying close even when cancer was winning. They weren't just objects, they were her. And Dad had let Lorraine trade them for a party. Disappointment clawed at me heavier than the anger. Dad used to cry when he talked about Mom. How could he do this, Lorraine? I could believe she'd always cared more about appearances than family, but Dad, that cut deeper. I shut down the computer, the screen going black. My plan was clear. Tomorrow I'd head to the pawn shop and get Mom's things back. Then I'd make them face what they'd done, not just to me, but to her memory. I stood, fists clenched, the weight of their betrayal settling in. This wasn't just about a watch or necklace. It was about trust, and they'd shattered it. Monday morning, I drove to the pawn shop in downtown Sugarland. My hands gripped the steering wheel. The email from last night burned into my mind. I had to see it for myself. Mom's keepsakes sold like they were nothing. Sugarland's quiet streets, lined with tidy lawns and sprawling oaks, felt suffocating today. This suburb where neighbors waved and kids rode bikes was the kind of place where secrets like this didn't belong. But the pawn shop, a small brick building tucked between a diner and a dry cleaner, was a local fixture. People came here when money got tight, and I was about to find out just how tight things were for Dad and my stepmom. I pushed open the door, a bell jingling above. The pawn shop owner, a guy in his 40s with a faded Astros cap, looked up from behind the counter. "Morning," he said, voice gruff but friendly. "What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm here about some items sold a couple weeks ago. A pocket watch engraved and a small and delicate gold necklace." His eyes narrowed slightly, like he sensed trouble. "Name's Philip," he said, extending a hand. "Philip Grant. Let me check the records." Philip flipped through a ledger, his fingers moving fast. "Yeah, got it. Sold by a Mr. Morgan. Older guy came in with a woman. Said they needed quick cash for a big event." My stomach twisted. That was Dad, no question, and the woman had to be my stepmom. "What event?" I asked, voice tight. Philip shrugged, glancing at a computer screen. "She was real excited, talking about some fancy party. Birthday, I think. Wanted to make it a big deal." I swallowed hard, picturing my stepmom's voice, all bubbly about her 50th. "Can I see them?" I asked. Philip nodded, disappearing into the back. He returned with a small plastic tray. There they were, Mom's watch, its silver face glinting under the shop's fluorescent lights, her initials etched in elegant loops. Next to it, her small and delicate gold necklace, its chain shimmering softly, the pendant still warm with her touch. My throat tightened. These weren't just things. They were Mom's laughter at our old kitchen table, her quiet strength when she knew she was running out of time. And they'd been sold for a measly $1,000. How much to get them back? I asked, my voice barely steady. Philip tapped his ledger. "They're still here, so I can sell them back for what we paid. 1,000 plus a small fee, say 1,200 total." I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my card, the one tied to my savings. 1,200 was a hit, but I'd worked overtime for months saving for a car. Mom's keepsakes were worth more than any car. Philip ran the transaction, his face softening. "You're doing right by these," he said, sliding the tray over. "The woman who sold them didn't seem to get how special they were." That stung. My stepmom's face flashed in my mind, her endless chatter about impressing the neighborhood. Dad, too, he'd stood there with her, letting it happen. I clutched the tray, the weight of the watch grounding me. "Thanks," I muttered, heading for the door. My anger was no longer just a spark, it was a fire. They'd sold Mom's memory to fund a party, and I wasn't letting that slide. Friday night at my stepmom's big birthday bash, I'd make sure everyone knew what they'd done. Not just for me, but for Mom. Sugarland's close-knit community would be there. Neighbors who'd known Mom, who'd seen her fight through her illness with grace. They deserved to know the truth. I slid the tray into my bag, the necklace chain softly clinking. My resolve hardened. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Dad and my stepmom would face the consequences, not in private, but where it hurt them most, in front of the people they tried so hard to impress. On Friday night, Lorraine's birthday party was in full swing at our house. The living room was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and music from the hired band. Neighbors and friends packed the space, their conversations mixing with the smell of the catered food. I stood tucked in a corner, clutching the wooden box that held my mom's keepsakes, my heart pounding like a drum. I had waited all week for this moment. The weight of the watch and the necklace in my hands gave me strength. This wasn't just a party. It was the stage to expose the truth. I scanned the crowd. Dad stood by the buffet, forcing a smile as he poured drinks. My stepmom in a glittering dress flitted among the guests, her laughter theatrical. Our neighbor, a woman with sharp eyes, whispered to the person beside her, glancing toward me. Her friend, loud and opinionated, was praising the party's extravagance. I took a deep breath and stepped to the center of the room. The band paused, sensing the shift in the air. All eyes turned to me. "Everyone," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "I need to say something." The room fell silent, forks frozen in midair. I held the box up. This belonged to my mom. Her watch, her necklace. These are what she left me. I found them at a pawn shop because Dad and Lorraine sold them to pay for this party. Gasps rippled through the room. Dad's face went pale, his glass trembling. Lorraine froze, her smile gone. "Henry?" Lorraine snapped, her voice sharp. "You're making a scene." She stepped forward, hands on her hips. "It was just some old stuff. We needed the money for something special. I didn't think it was a big deal." Her words landed like a slap. Not a big deal. I opened the box and pulled out the watch, its silver flashing under the lights. This was my mom's. She wore it every day. This necklace, she wore it through every chemo session. And you sold them to pay for a tent and a band. Dad stammered, "Henry, I didn't mean to." His voice broke as he looked at the stunned guests. "We thought you wouldn't notice." That admission hurt worse than anything. They'd plotted to hide it from me, to erase my mom's memory behind my back. I turned to the crowd, my voice cold and steady despite the ache in my chest. They thought I wouldn't notice that they traded my mom's memory for a party, but I did. And everyone here should know who they really are. The room erupted in murmurs. Our neighbor Norma leaned over to whisper to someone else, her words sharp and quick. Lorraine's friend Esther looked mortified, covering her mouth with her hands. Lorraine's face flushed. "Henry, you're overreacting," she snapped. "This is my 50th. I wanted it to be special. You're ruining everything." I shook my head, my anger controlled and focused. "You ruined it when you sold my mom's things. You don't get to play the victim." I set the box on the dining table. The necklace chain softly clinked inside. Every guest could see it now, the proof of their betrayal. Norma's whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire. Dad reached for my arm, his voice low. "Son, let's talk privately." I pulled away. "No, Dad. You made this public when you sold her memory. I'm not hiding your shame anymore." I turned and walked out, the noise of the party fading behind me. The night air hit my face as I stepped onto the porch, my chest tight, but my mind clear. I wouldn't forgive them, not tonight, not ever. They would face the consequences of their actions, starting with the judging eyes of Sugarland's tight-knit community. The next afternoon, Lorraine tried to salvage her reputation. She organized a tea gathering in the dining room at the very same table where I had left Mom's keepsake box the night before. The air inside felt stifling, heavy with the aftermath of our confrontation. Lorraine called it a chance to make peace, inviting our neighbor Norma, her close friend Esther, and a few others who had attended the birthday party. All morning she busied herself arranging trays of cookies and brewing tea, her smile tight and forced. I sat in the living room watching her fuss over every detail, fully aware that this was her desperate attempt to regain the respect she'd lost. By 2 in the afternoon, the house was eerily silent. No doorbell rang, no car pulled into the driveway. I glanced out the window. Sugarland's quiet streets looked even stiller than usual. The absence of guests said it all. Norma, with her talent for spreading gossip like wildfire, must have told everyone about last night's incident. The entire neighborhood now knew that Dad and Lorraine had sold Mom's watch and necklace to fund the party. Esther, who was usually glued to Lorraine's side, hadn't even bothered to text. The silence was cutting, and Lorraine's forced smile began to crack. "Henry." Lorraine called, her voice strained as she stepped into the living room. "Can we talk? I want to apologize." She gestured toward a chair, her hands fidgeting nervously. I stayed standing, arms crossed. "Go ahead," I said flatly. She drew a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't realize how much those things meant to you. I just wanted my 50th birthday to be special." Her words sounded rehearsed, like she cared more about her image than my pain. I shook my head, jaw tightening. "They weren't just things, Lorraine. That watch was Mom's. She wore it through every chemo session. That necklace was her final gift to me, and you two sold them like they were garbage." My voice rose steady but sharp. "You think a tea party can fix that?" Lorraine flinched, her eyes darting toward the empty room. "Henry, I didn't know," she whispered. "We needed the money. It was a mistake." Dad appeared in the doorway, his shoulders slumped. "Henry," he said quietly, "I was wrong. I shouldn't have agreed to it." His confession hit hard, but it didn't erase my disappointment. I looked at him, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cried at Mom's funeral. "You knew what those things meant," I said. "You let her talk you into it, and you hid it from me. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. Lorraine's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. Those tears weren't for Mom or me. They were for the neighbors who had turned their backs on her. Dad just stood there, silent, his face heavy with guilt. I looked toward the dining table where the box still sat untouched. "I'm not staying here," I said coldly. "I can't live with people who would do that to Mom's memory." Lorraine reached out, hesitating. "Henry, please. We can work this out. Work this." I stepped back. "No, we can't." I walked upstairs, my footsteps echoing through the quiet house. Lorraine's weak voice followed, pleading, but I closed my door. Their betrayal settled deeper, like a dull ache in my chest. I had trusted Dad to honor Mom's memory, but he had chosen Lorraine's vanity over her legacy. Lorraine's obsession with appearances had cost them more than a party, it had cost them me. Downstairs, I heard her pacing, muttering about what the neighbors must think. Dad said nothing. His silence said it all. Sugarland's close-knit community had already begun to turn away. Norma's gossip had done its work, and the empty chairs at Lorraine's tea gathering were proof enough. I looked around my room, the place I'd called home for years, and knew I couldn't stay. Not after everything they'd done. By Sunday, I knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in, each room tainted by the sting of Dad and Lorraine's betrayal. I headed to my bedroom, pulling out a duffel bag from under the bed. My hands moved on autopilot, folding clothes, packing books, and carefully placing Mom's keepsake box on top. The watch's faint ticking and the soft clink of her necklace grounded me, a reminder of why I had to go. This wasn't just about leaving a house, it was about breaking free from people who'd traded Mom's memory for a fleeting party. I sat at my desk, the late afternoon light filtering through the window. Opening my laptop, I started typing an email to Dad. My fingers hovered, the words hard to find but necessary. "Dad," I wrote, "I'm leaving because you and Lorraine sold Mom's watch and necklace. Those weren't just objects, they were her love, her strength. You chose a party over her memory, and I can't forgive that. I need space, maybe forever. Don't try to fix this." I hit send, my chest tight but resolute. There was no going back now. As I zipped up the bag, my phone buzzed. Lorraine's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Henry," she said, when I picked up, her voice thick with desperation. "Please don't leave. We can talk this out. I didn't mean to hurt you." Her words sounded hollow, like another attempt to save face. Lorraine. I cut in my tone icy. You don't get it. You sold Mom's legacy. There's nothing left to say. I hung up my thumb, lingering over her number before I blocked it. The silence that followed felt like freedom. I carried my bag downstairs, the house unnaturally still. Dad was in the kitchen staring at his coffee mug, but he didn't look up as I passed. Lorraine was nowhere in sight, probably hiding in her room reeling from the failed tea party. I stepped outside, the Sugarland air warm and heavy. As I loaded my car, I caught a glimpse of our neighbor Norma across the street talking animatedly to another neighbor. Her hands waved, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch words like disgrace and poor boy. The story of Mom's keepsakes was spreading, and with it, the tension in this tight-knit community was spiking. Norma's gossip was like gasoline fueling judgment that would follow Dad and Lorraine wherever they went. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief washed over me like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was free from their lies, free to protect Mom's memory, but sadness crept in too, a dull ache for the family we used to be. I remembered Dad teaching me to throw a baseball, Mom cheering from the porch. Those days were gone, buried under their choice to sell what mattered most. I glanced at the keepsake box on the passenger seat, its wooden edges worn but solid. It was all I needed to carry forward. Sugarland's quiet streets faded in my rearview mirror. I didn't know where I'd end up, maybe a cheap apartment near Houston, close enough for work, but far from this mess. The thought of starting over was daunting, but it felt right. I'd build a life where Mom's memory was honored, not pawned off. Norma's whispers would keep the neighborhood buzzing, and Dad and Lorraine would feel the sting of their actions every time they faced a cold shoulder. I didn't need to look back to know that. A week later, I heard from a friend about the neighborhood gossip. Sugarland's tight-knit community with its manicured lawns and friendly waves had turned cold toward Dad and Lorraine. Our neighbor Norma, never one to hold her tongue, had spread the story of how they sold Mom's keepsakes like wildfire. By now, every barbecue and book club in town knew they'd pawned my mother's watch and necklace for a party. In a place like Sugarland, where reputation was everything, that kind of scandal stuck like tar. I'd settled into a small apartment near Houston, a short drive from my job as a software engineer. The place was modest, bare walls, a creaky bed, and a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. Mom's keepsake box sat on a shelf by my desk, the watches soft, ticking a quiet comfort. I'd open it sometimes, tracing the loops of her initials, or gently touching her small and delicate gold necklace, its words grounding me. Protecting her memory gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Word from the neighborhood painted a grim picture for Dad and Lorraine. Invitations to the usual events, backyard, BBQs, block parties, even the monthly HOA meetings stopped coming. One neighbor who used to share beers with Dad now crossed the street to avoid him. Lorraine, desperate to repair her image, tried hosting a charity bake sale. She'd spent days baking cookies and putting up flyers, but only a handful of people showed up, most just to gawk. The failure hit her hard, and Dad, once the life of any gathering, had grown quiet, barely leaving the house. Norma's gossip had turned their social life into a ghost town. I got a text from Lorraine's friend Esther one evening. "Lorraine's a mess," it read. "She regrets everything but doesn't know how to face you." I stared at the message, feeling nothing but a dull pang. Lorraine's regret was too late, and her silence now only proved she cared more about her pride than my pain. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on my new routine, coding at work, grabbing coffee with co-workers, building a life free from betrayal. A letter arrived from Dad a few days later, his handwriting shaky on the envelope. "Henry," he wrote, "I failed you and your mom. I let Lorraine's plans cloud my judgment. I'm sorry, and I'll always be. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I read it twice, my throat tight. Part of me wanted to believe him, to remember the dad who'd carried me on his shoulders. But the trust was gone, shattered when he chose a party over Mom's legacy. I folded the letter and tucked it away unanswered. I wasn't ready to forgive, and maybe I never would be. Sitting in my apartment, I thought about what Mom's keepsakes meant. Her watch wasn't just metal and glass, it was her strength ticking through her hardest days. Her small and delicate gold necklace wasn't just gold, it was her warmth guiding me when I felt lost. I'd fought to keep them, and that fight had cost me my family. But it also taught me something: living, honestly protecting what matters was worth more than any fleeting comfort. I'd build my life around that truth no matter how hard it got. Sugarland's close-knit world thrived on trust, and Dad and Lorraine had broken it. Their actions rippled beyond our house, turning neighbors into strangers. The community, once warm with shared dinners and friendly chats, now judged them through whispers and cold shoulders. Their selfishness had a price, and they were paying it every day. I didn't need to see it to know it was justice. This story isn't just mine, it's a reminder to cherish the memories that define us. Mom's keepsakes were more than objects. They were love, sacrifice, and history. Betraying them for a moment of glory cost Dad and Lorraine their place in a community they valued. For anyone listening, let this be a lesson. Respect the legacies of those you love. Selfish choices leave scars that don't fade. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this journey. I hope it resonates with you. Please share your thoughts below and consider subscribing to hear more stories like this.